Absolutely, yes, I loved it. Really, from very early on, very keen on using automatic pens, round brush, calligraphers, type designers, letter cutters in stone, and wanted to use calligraphy in a graphic. The early days of letter exchange, when I was talking to you about the letter.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Calligraphy Masters podcast. If you watch my last two podcasts, you know I started giving prints prints away for the people who are commenting under the podcast episodes. So the winner of last week's will be the pinned comment under this video. Before this podcast starts, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, like the video, and if you want to get a chance to win one of those prints next week, drop a comment after you watch the podcast with your favorite moment. Today's episode is with Rachell Yallop, a super nice lady that we spoke last year. Just now when I was editing the podcast, I was smiling all the time, and like apparently during the whole talk we were having fun. I mean, it was cool. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. So hi Rachell, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Tell us, like, I don't know so much about your background. Maybe there's information online, but I prefer to learn from people. And also the people who don't know anything about you. I'm pretty sure a lot of people know who you are, but at the same time, there's a lot of new people coming into calligraphy who don't have such a big idea about people with the skills like yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was very lucky in that both my parents encouraged my love of art. So I loved, as a child, you know, I loved drawing and doing any kind of art subject. And in fact, I remember when I was 50, I had a big birthday party, and my brother managed to dig out some school reports from when we were children. And he had one from when I was only 4 years old, and it said, "Rachell is very good at art." So it goes back a long way, and I'm nearly 60 now. So that's a long time.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I loved art, and my parents were very keen to encourage me and so on, and so they were more than happy that I went to art college when I left school. And then you did something called a foundation course. So you do a year at usually your local art college, and where you do all sorts of different subjects, and to do, you know, drawing and graphics and various different things, so that you could decide what you might like to do for when you went on to do a degree. So I chose graphics. And I went to Ravensbourne College of Art, which is just outside London, to do my graphics degree. And it was so long ago, more than 40 years ago, that they still did calligraphy as part of a graphics course. Which I'm not sure would really happen now. But it was, looking back, I mean, that was so important, because if you think when you're using type, what font to choose and so on, if you know where that type comes from, because ultimately it does come from calligraphy and drawn letter forms and so on. So it was actually very, very important as a designer to learn about calligraphy to help you with graphic design. So that is how I started when I was at art college. Although I recently remembered that my mother had been a teacher, and when she was at teacher training college, she had done some calligraphy, and she still had her pens and I think some exemplars and so on. And I think when I was about 15, she showed those to me, and I've still got the pens now, actually. And I had a bit of a go then. So I'd had just done a little bit before I started properly at art college. So
I'm really curious, like, as you said, you were like focused on art in general, but when you discovered calligraphy, was it something you felt it's more special than the rest? Did you have love for letters all your life, or is something that happened when you went to college?
Interesting. I did enjoy handwriting, and I would change my handwriting every so often. I was taught a style which is called Marion Richardson back in the 60s, which is very round. And so I wrote like that a bit as a child. Then I thought, well, I don't like this, I'm going to change it. And so I would do a much more italic style. And I would alter letters and how I did things. Yes, I suppose. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I did do a little bit of sort of playing around with letters before I even did calligraphy properly. Yes.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I myself, I remember from very small, I was always in love with letters in different ways. And the youngest I remember, I just wanted to write very beautiful, like some of my classmates were, and I was always like, wow, how is he writing so beautiful? I want to do the same. So
Yes, yeah,
it's funny to hear, like, different people, they have different ways, but it's funny to hear that you had it the same way.
yes, yeah.
So when you started in college, like, was it something that took your attention at all, or it was through some years it developed naturally? Or
No, as soon as I started doing it, I was just gripped by it. Yeah. I was addicted from the start. Yeah, I absolutely, yes, I loved it really from very early on. And yeah, and I always, I say it is my life's work. Doing calligraphy is what I do, and apart from anything else, it's I've always loved it.
with what scripts did you start? Like, was it something that you start specific, or you started with something and you wanted to learn another script? Like, how did your script love develop to
Yeah,
now? Because, for example,
yeah.
I started because of fracture.
Oh, did you? Right, yes, yeah. At college, we learned all the sort of traditional things like Roman capitals, and then we did a foundational around hand, and we did italic, and so we went through those. But one thing I think was very important is that we didn't spend, say, a long time just doing round hand. We would do, say, round hand in the morning, and then in the afternoon we'd get out automatic pens or other tools and do something much more expressive. And so we ran the two together. We ran the formal and the informal expressive, gestural, whatever you like to call it. We ran those two things together. And I think, looking back, I think that was very important to not, I mean, obviously you need to learn the basics very thoroughly and so on. But I think it was good that we did the two together. I think that helped. When I was learning calligraphy at art college, I was introduced to the work of German calligraphers, 20th century German calligraphers, people like Friedrich Poppel, his student Werner Schneider, and other calligraphers of that period. And I was just amazed by that work. I absolutely loved it right from the start, and thought, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. So right from very early on, I was following that sort of route. I loved, particularly Werner Schneider. I loved his work.
I never heard this name. Like,
Yes, no, yeah, there are the group of German photographers in the.
which period is this? Like, that they were living and doing art?
Well, Werner sadly died very recently, but he was born, I think, in 1935. And Friedrich Poppel was his teacher, and so it would have been in the 50s, perhaps the 1950s, 60s, and I was at college in the early 1980s. So they were sort of early to mid 20th century calligraphers, yeah. and going on, you know, beyond that as well. But yeah, there's a very definite sort of style of German calligraphy at that period, which I absolutely loved and was a big sort of opener for me. You know, I just thought, now this is calligraphy.
That's funny because like mostly I know your work is like with pointed nibs, right? Like copper plate, or I don't know, is it round hand? Because I know from Paul Antonio that there is a huge difference from round hand and copper plate, but at the same time, some people, they think they're the same. So what exactly is your work, like those works in your profile that I'm referring right now to?
Yes, so the copper plate came a little later. But very early on from college, and then the first few years, I was very keen on using automatic pens, round brush, and ruling pens. And I still do ruling pens now. And brush, actually. I do all sorts of different things. But I think sometimes people just know me for copper plate. But I have other things.
Why do you think is that? Like, don't you upload your other stuff as well?
I do. Yes, I do. But, you know, I find when I post things, say on Instagram, I get far more likes for something that's copper plate than I do for other things. And I think, oh, this is what people enjoy seeing. So I'll post that. So,
no, you shouldn't think this way. You know, Instagram, Instagram works in crazy ways. I mean, they change the algorithms all the time. So just because something is not as liked as the other things doesn't mean people don't like it. Just it's sometimes Instagram is very weird, but I'm pretty sure people would love to see different things from you.
Right, I will take note of that then. Yes, but the copper plate, I started that in, let me think, about 1995, I would say. And I just, you know, I saw examples and I kind of began to be interested and thought, oh, I wonder, you know, if I could do that. And I had a friend who did copper plate and showed me a bit about how to get started. And then very soon after that, French calligrapher Jean Larchet came over to England to teach a workshop, a week, I think it was, on copper plate. So, you know, great, I sign up to it. And that is really how I got started on that, through him. So yeah, and I think I went to another workshop of his a little bit later as well. But that is how, because my copper plate is very much what I call the swelling line, in the all strokes, they start fine, they swell to a thickness in the middle, and then they return to a slender finish. Whereas a lot of copper plate, the general stuff that you would see is not like that, in that there are squared off endings to letters, start and finishes to letters. But I have always done the swelling line, and that I got that idea from Jean. He did that.
So this is something that you've learned, or it's something that you felt like it has to be your own?
No, I learned that way of doing it from him, yes. And then I just really like that way of doing it, so I have carried on.
Because like I haven't seen many people copper plate. Like I don't actually think I've seen anyone that has copper plate that looks like yours. I mean, when I see your work, I know it's your copper plate, you know.
Yes, well, that's good. Yes, yes. Well, I owe Jean Larchet that, his way of teaching, and obviously I then started to develop it myself, and it kind of, you know, went from there, really. Yeah.
So how much did it take you to develop it, and that you felt like, okay, I feel comfortable with this script and I like how it turns out?
Yes, well, a while, I would think, you know, 2 or 3 years probably, I would think. But, you know, I look back now at early work, copper plate I did, and I thought, oh no, look at that. You know, well, it wasn't terrible, but, you know, but it takes a long time to get good at copper plate. Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice, like everything else. But
yes,
I don't know. I'm mostly into like broad edge pen calligraphy and nibs. I feel more comfortable, and it's also what I like. With copper
Yes.
plate, I don't know. I'm kind of afraid from pointed nibs. It's like Paul Antonio has been like so mad with me. He gives me access to his classes. I have his copper plate manual. I don't
Yes.
know. For me, copper plate is super hard. I don't know why.
Yes, yes. I do think it's hard. I really do. And I think one of the reasons is that with the pointed nib, of course, you have to make the thick and thin stroke. And you have to put apply the pressure at the right time so that the nib will open up and you get the swelling line. And then of course, release the pressure so it goes back to thin. Whereas when you're using a broad edge tool, at least you've got the tool is the right shape for the for making a broad edged letter,
Yeah.
because it's a broad edge tool. Whereas with the pointed one, you just have to do everything. Not only do you have to make the letter shape, obviously, and do all the spacing and all that, but you've got to make the thick and thin as well. And I think that's one main difference between a pointed pen script and a broad-edged pen one. And I think that's it's quite hard that to get the weight in the right place.
You've learned also other scripts. Does it mean like copper plate is the hardest to learn? Did you have any issues like or something that was really hard for you to learn before
Yes.
you came to copper plate?
I think copper plate is probably the hardest. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
then I should stay away from it.
No.
I
yeah.
I mean, copper plate is cool, but what I see in myself and with a lot of the new younger generations is like people don't have the patience and they just want to learn everything right now, right here. And
Yes, I think that's true, actually. Yes, I think it is true. And it takes, because sometimes people will say, how long does it take to learn this? Or whatever, and then I always say it takes a lifetime.
well,
In that you need to, commit. Okay, I mean, if you spend every day doing it, there is going to be a time when you will become good at it, because just through practice. But I think it takes many years, because you develop over the years. You just become better as years go by, become better at it if you keep practicing, of course. So.
Okay, and then at what point in your life you realized or you actually turned this into profession? When you were like, and how did you start it? Was it teaching people? Was it doing some commission work?
No, I started, I was either very brave or possibly very foolish in that I started as soon as I left art college. So I thought, I want to do calligraphy. And I want to, have a job as a calligrapher, make a living as a calligrapher. And the only way to do that really was to become self-employed, because you couldn't, get a job at a company or whatever as a calligrapher. So I became self-employed as soon as I left college, when I was, I don't know, probably 23, I think. Because I did a master's as well. So yeah, I was about 23. Yeah, and I did know that I wanted to use calligraphy in a graphics context. So and I knew that there were graphic design consultants out there who were, say, for example, redesigning packaging. And they might need calligraphy or some hand lettering for the label of, I don't know, a bottle of wine or something. Yeah, and so I wrote to lots of people, and I did a brochure, a sort of leaflet thing, and I sent that out with it. And amazingly enough, people phoned me up.
This is how it works.
I know. And so it started, but it took quite a while before it really sort of took off, obviously. But I would keep doing promotions, but of course this is before we had social media to do that. So I would actually, you know, I would mail. I would do what we would call a mail shot. I would mail out a leaflet with designs and things on it. Yeah.
And then how turned this later? Because I know you do some workshops. Like, at what point in your life you felt like you can teach people, or was it some people requesting from you teaching?
Yes. Let me think. So in a yeah, gosh, I want to know this now. Yeah, in 1988, the society called Letter Exchange, which is a society for professional calligraphers, type designers, letter cutters in stone, and so on. That started in 1988. And I went along, I was invited to be a founder member, to join. And I went along to the meeting, and there I met a man called John Gibbs, who taught at Reigate School of Art in Surrey, and they had a calligraphy department there. And I was chatting to him. I was probably being I don't know, some forthright views or whatever, and he said, "You need to come and teach at Reigate." And I said, "But I've never taught before." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that, you'll be fine."
Wow.
So yeah, so I went down there for a sort of a bit of an interview, and I was accepted to do a part-time, so 1 day a week I did, yeah, in the graphics department, but teaching a certain amount of graphics, but also calligraphy to the graphics students. And I was there, oh, you know, probably about 10 years or so. I was there doing a day a week. And then I also taught at Epsom Art School, again, just sort of a part-time for 1 term, say. So I did a bit of that. And then people did, for instance, the regional calligraphy societies in this country, of which there are quite a few. I would be invited to go and teach a Saturday workshop, or, you know, and so I started to do that quite a bit as well. Yeah, so that's how that began, really, all because I went to the first letter exchange meeting.
Wow. And what are you teaching only copperplate script, or you teach
Oh,
other
no.
stuff as well?
No, I teach lots of different things. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
what are you teaching?
So well, they're lit on my website. There's a page which shows workshops and so on, so that could be looked at. But one of the things is I do a flat brushed workshop, doing abstract designs and large letters using a flat brush. I've got another one called drawn shaded letters, then the various ruling pen classes, using different ruling pen techniques, using different sorts of ruling pen, from cola pens and down to pointed ruling pens, for example. An italic, a sort of a large kind of rhythmic italic, that's another one. So yeah, and copperplate variations is another one. Yeah, so all sorts of different things, actually.
Which of all of these is your favorite to teach people, and why?
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one.
Why?
Yes. Oh, well, I see. I love them all. I think, yeah, I at the moment I'd be favouring ruling pen workshops and copperplate variations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you teach only Zoom right now at the moment? Or?
So I I have done since the start of the pandemic. I was approached by 1 or 2 people to, and then it went from there. And over the last couple of years, I've actually taught a lot of Zoom workshops, yeah, for people all over the world.
I see. But you do them on your, you have your own platform, or you do collaboration with some people? Or
so I don't have my own platform at the moment, but I've been invited to by, for example, there's a calligraphy society in Australia, and I was due to travel to Australia to teach,
Okay.
but obviously that couldn't happen. So they thought, well, let's do it online instead. So they set that up, and we had a little course. And there's also the European Pointed Pen Collective. They're a lovely group. I've done a number of workshops for them, but they have organised them, and then I teach them. Yes.
Cool. So this means, like, if I organize something with Calligraphy Masters, would you be willing to teach?
I would be. Yes, I'd be delighted.
Okay,
yes.
That's awesome. Okay,
yes.
Then I'll keep the, like, let me just write this because I don't want to speak about it on the podcast. But let's go back to your copper plates. At the point where you were more like involved with the copper plate, were there other calligraphers who were doing copper plate that were inspiring you back then? Also, what are you a person who, because I know traditionally copper plate has to be written with a straight pen holder, but at the same time nowadays many people are writing copper plate with the oblique holder.
Yes, they
So
are. Yeah.
with I guess you're doing it with a straight holder, right?
I am doing it with a straight because when I had the classes with Jean Larcher, he always used a straight holder. You know, we'd have the materials list, this is what you need, and so on. And I realized sometime after that some people did use an oblique, and I think I did try it, but didn't particularly like it. I like the straight holder because it affords more pen manipulation, which I think is actually very important, particularly if you're doing any kind of variation. Yeah, I would always go for a straight holder.
Well, which means you learned it by traditions, because Paul has explained to me that oblique pen holder was created only for Spencer and nothing else.
Right. Okay.
And I don't know like how or who started using oblique holders for copper plate, as you're not able to produce the accurate copper plate letters with the oblique holder. There will be some differences which I cannot explain as good because I'm not Paul.
Yes.
But he's spoken about this.
Yes. No, I've had students in classes who are my copper plate variations styles, who have said, oh, I'd normally use an oblique holder when I'm doing a formal script, but now I see with the variations I need to use a straight one because they need it, as I said, it affords more pen manipulation. Yeah. So so I would always have a straight one. Yes. Yeah.
And about some names that were influencing you or like inspiring you to write, some other calligraphers, more traditional masters that may not be so known nowadays?
I mean, I think it was really Jean who's, you know, who I loved his work and followed, you know, followed what he did. So he really was to be honest, really my sole inspiration on it. Yeah.
Like, I don't know this guy. Like, this is the first time I hear him. Like, does he has any books? Can I find his work online?
So, yeah, he died about 5 years ago now. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, but you can still see his work online if you just put his name into Google or whatever. There is a website which shows his work, and he did copper plate, but he did ruling pen stuff. He did all sorts of things. So yes, Jean Larcher. Yeah.
So you said you've done only like workshops and attending classes. Did you ever use any books, or can you remember some books that helped you in your beginning?
Yeah, I think certainly with the copper plate, the universal penman, the Bickham one. Of course, it's not an instructional book, but it is just full of examples, and they are engraved letters actually, rather than at least I think they are, rather than written ones. But they're just there are pages and pages of beautiful script, and I found that inspirational on that front. And I don't know, other books from early days were things like Modern Scribes and Lettering Artists. Was a great one. And another one that I'm looking at my bookshelves recently was 60 Alphabets by Gunlager Bream. And that was sort of, is like a page for, a double page for each person. And that's how I began to see that there were people all over the world doing calligraphy, and I could, became familiar with their work through that one book, really. 60 Alphabets, yes, by Gunlager Bream. He is Icelandic, I think.
I'll check that. Sounds interesting.
Yes, yeah. And another one I liked, The Mystic Art of Written Forms, and that's at Friedrich Neugebauer. So again, one of the German calligraphers from mid sort of 20th century, full of all sorts of.
I mean, like it's crazy how many like German calligraphers there are actually. I mean, when I started, I knew only about Hermann Zapf and Rudolf Koch,
Yes.
but obviously there are so many. Like even some of the names that you're telling me, I'm like, why I don't know those names?
Yes. Yeah. Well, probably because I'm a little bit older than you. Maybe that's why.
Yes, of course, but that's why it's also cool to make this podcast.
Yes.
Where I would find such information, or some other people, like that's super awesome. And do you have any favorite nibs for copper plate? Also, in your beginning, was you using specific kind of nibs that you changed later on? And what was the?
Yes, I did. Well, Jean used Gillett 303, which I think is sometimes called Gillett. I don't know whether it's Gillett or Gillett. Anyway, I've always called it Gillett. I can't change now.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Whatever.
So the 303, that was the one he was keen on, and I think was probably the one he told us we should get. So I started with that. The great thing about that one is a very fine point. So you could do really fine lines for the thin, the thin lines, and then it was nice and flexible. So it opened up well for the the thicker line. So I used those for years actually, but then I felt that the nib quality was no longer as good as it was. The manufacturer was no longer as good as it was, and I've had one or two other people say the same on that actually. So I changed to the Hunt 101, which again has a fine point, is flexible, but just it's a little bit more robust than that Gillett one. So now I'd always use the Hunt 101 for my work. Okay,
you use this one, but is it okay for beginners to use also this one, or it's more for advanced people?
Yeah, I mean, I was a beginner. The Gillett, it was a similar one to the Hunt, and I was a beginner, of course, when I started to use that. I think sometimes a beginner might be better with a slightly more robust nib, so a little less pointed, and one that's a little bit stiffer, while you sort of get the feel of it. But I think certainly for my work, because I want to have, I really want that swelling line, so I need a very flexible nib. But probably, perhaps if you're not used to it, it might be slightly more difficult to manage one that's with such a fine point and it's flexible. So yeah,
I see. Okay. And you said also you're right now mostly interested in ruling pens. Like, are there any specific brand ruling pens that you use? Because I have a few ruling pens, but I think my favorite one is Handrhythmic by Brody.
Oh yes.
I don't know if you've tried this one, or
so yes, I don't have one, but I have tried one, and it was very nice, I must say. Yes. The ruling pens I've got vintage pointed ruling pens.
Oh, the old ones from the compass sets?
Yes. Okay. And they, I mean, I've got one that belonged to a set, was from a set that belonged to my father. Now, my father was born in 1918, so and he perhaps had it at school. So that pen is, maybe 90 years old, something like that now.
Wow.
I think the vintage ones are great. If anyone who's interested in that, if they could get hold of a vintage one, it's well worth it. Actually, they're not very expensive because, people don't particularly want to buy little geometry sets now.
Where can you find such stuff?
Yeah, well, we would, you go into a town and you'll find a little antique shop, but not a sort of very expensive sort of antique shop, a bit slightly more what we would call a junk shop.
Okay.
And they have, all sorts of things. And you might well find a little wooden box which had was a geometry set, and in it would be, a ruling pen. So I would, but you can probably look online and find vintage ones as well.
Yeah, I think I need to look online because I know Tius one. I don't know if you know him. He's in Berlin, and there's also this kind of shops. And he told me one story where he found a book. I don't remember, was it by Rudolf Koch or somebody else? But it was a super limited, super special book. There were made only probably 25 in the whole world ever. And he got it for like €5. The person who was selling it didn't know what it is.
No, how wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is so cool that you have such shops, because I'm here in Bulgaria. I don't think we have such things, maybe, like,
right.
And
yes.
it's I'm not able to find such treasures because
yes.
wow, but
so I found the vintage ones much better than a modern, new one that you could buy. They seem to have a slightly finer point. The blade is kind of longer. On a pointed ruling pen, there's a little sort of dial on it where you can close and open the tines, blades, whatever you like to call them. And that's usually smaller than the ones now, because if you've got quite a large dial, it's often difficult to use that pen properly, because you need to change position in your hand, you need to manipulate the tool and so on. So yes.
Wait,
but
just a sec.
Yes.
So you prefer working with those kind of ruling pens, right? Because there are also stuff like this.
Those. Yeah, absolutely. So I would have those, the folded one, well, either like the ones that you've got, or a metal folded pen.
Okay. Right. Oh, you mean like this?
Like that, yes. But I've got some that were made by Tim Lee in America, Tim's pens, and they are very nice. A folded ruling pen. And then of course there's polar pen, make your own folded pen.
Yeah. I mean, this is also self-made, like
yes, yeah.
My crew member, like Nick, who did actually this the black one here behind me. He made this one. I don't know how he made it, because it looks super professional, and I love this one. But what's the one that you said? Where can you buy it? Like you said this name?
Tim Lee.
Tim Lee? So
Tim Lee, and that's a Lee, Leigh, spelt. And he made these folded ruling pens, and some of them have got a sort of a curved cut to them, and some of them are what he calls a dagger blade on them.
So my question was, like, which one of the, because like they're different, and for me, like the small ones, the vintage one that you talk about, like I've tried them, but they seem like either I don't know how to use them, or it's very difficult, or like I have to do very expressive stuff, which I'm not sure that I can. So with me, I feel much more comfortable with something like this, or something like handrhythmic.
Yes. I think it depends what you want to do. For example, the pointed ruling, I think perhaps people feel they might be a bit limited, and you can just do a sort of a fine line with them because it's a pointed tool. But no, it depends on how you hold it. You can actually get a wide variety of line widths from a pointed ruling pen. That's
Yeah.
one of the things you learn in my workshop
Yeah, that was
about,
what
about ruling pen techniques.
I was about to say, like, that's the place where you can learn all this stuff. Just go to your class.
Yes.
But yeah, I'll check
Yes.
this
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Also, guys, I'll leave some links to Rachel in the description if you're interested in her classes. And also, as we already learned, we might have a class together, which will be super exciting.
Be wonderful. Yeah.
But yeah, what else?
Ruling pens, there are various different, obviously you've just shown different ones. There are all sorts of different types, and that is great because they give different sorts of marks, different lines. You can use them for different purposes. So they, I think that's what's one of the great things about ruling pens. There are so many different things you can do with them.
Yeah. And so discovered books. Is there a tip or advice that you received from someone that helped you the most with calligraphy? Like, what's this one advice that somebody gave you and it helped you the most?
Yeah, I think one of the people who had a very big influence on me was Hans Bogut, again, a German calligrapher. And in the early days of letter exchange, when I was talking to you about in the late 80s, he would come over to London, and he did a couple of workshops I went to, and he would give lectures and so on. So we got to know him. And one of the main things I learned from him is that, well, before I met him, I thought that all letters needed to have equal spacing. So you put letters and there should be equal spacing with them, between them. You can move letters up and down to get to have movement, but you wouldn't move them horizontally. But then I met him and I found actually that you could do that. So you could set up a rhythm, say something quite angular, quite pointed, quite close together, and then you could have a big open letter, and then you could go back to the previous rhythm. And that was a complete revelation to me. It had never occurred to me that you could do, or that it was all right that you could do that. And so that I found was a big influence on me. His ideas about what you could do with calligraphy was a big influence. And I started, and when I developed my copper plate variations, I have done that with some of the letters, and that comes from him, that background, that you might pull out a letter so that it's no longer the same width as others.
This is funny because when you're telling it, because while we were telling it, I immediately was thinking of your work, and it's true. But at the same time, isn't this what people teach, like, or the masters, or it's like more advanced calligrapher, what they are teaching the people is that you have to have balance and stuff like this. So how is that working? Isn't this against the rules, or like, I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, if there are rules, I love to break them.
I think a lot of calligraphers love to break the rules. That's so funny.
Yes.
Like how?
Yes. Yeah. No, if I'm told, well, I'm sorry, but it has to be like this. You have to do this, 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 and this. I think, no, I don't. I'm going to do something different. Oh dear. Yeah. I think, I mean, you need to learn all the basics, all the formal stuff, all to do with spacing. You need to learn about design and all those things. And when you've done that, you can then, inverted commas, break the rules and do something different with them. When you have all that in your background, all that knowledge and so on, you can then break out and make it work.
I see.
So yeah.
And what do you think about, I'm sure you've seen online, there's a lot of people, they go into the iPads and Procreate and they do calligraphy with iPads. Like,
yes.
Have you tried iPad calligraphy, and what are your your thoughts about it?
Yes. I haven't tried it. I think, I mean, it would be good to give it a go and see what it was, what it was like. I feel that I suppose if I really wanted to do it, I'd have tried by now. I like the ink and the pen, the ink, the brush, whatever, and the paper. And because to a certain extent, you don't quite know what's going to happen as you make that first mark. And particularly, say, if you're using a Cola pen, you can get that wonderful spatter effect. And the thrill when that happens, even after all these years, you make that line and you just think, wow, look at that. Now, I may be wrong, but I don't think you would have that in when one was doing the on the iPad. But I don't really know enough about it. It would be one of those things that if someone said, "Look, come on, I'll just show you. Try this," then obviously I would have a go. But I like the ink, the paper, the feel of the pen in my hand, and the different kind of marks that you can make, the different lines you get from an actual tool.
Yeah, like I feel the same way as you. Like I'm not such a fan of iPad calligraphy, especially not because there are, I don't know how it's called, but there are some options where even if you write it in a wrong way, it will look correct. And
Yes.
it can look like you have skills without you having the skills, and that's what I don't.
Right.
Well, that's what I don't like about iPad calligraphy. I mean, I've said it before. If people would do iPad calligraphy or want to try it, they should do it at the point when they already have developed calligraphy skills. But
Yes, I agree. Yes, yeah.
as a
I also
beginners,
from the examples that I've seen, it looks a little bit too perfect. Whereas if you look at or particularly if an original piece of work, you can, there is texture there with the ink or the paint or whatever you've used. I think it has more life to it. There's a sort of flatness to the work I've seen done on an iPad, but I don't know a lot about it, so it doesn't particularly appeal to me, but that doesn't mean that one shouldn't have a go. So.
And then I think you're majorly working on paper, right? Like you do calligraphy on paper, and
Yes, pretty much always. Yes.
so
Yes.
do you have any specific favorite paper? Because different materials work with different tools and different things, but through all these years, did you find some paper that you feel most comfortable writing on, and which would that be?
I know I use a lot of layout paper. So there's a De La Rowney layout paper that I would start all kind of, having a go, get started with it with layout paper. The Rhodia paper is very good for copper plate, but it's lovely and smooth, just wonderful. Because trying to write on a textured paper with a copper plate nib is a nightmare. So the smoother the paper, the better. But there's an Angre paper that's a black Angre Mitante, I think it's called. That no, it's not Angre, it's Canson. Sorry, a Canson Mitante. There's black and white and I think various other colours. And that is a smoother on one side and more textured on the other. That I like, particularly the black one for doing white on black letters. Or a watercolor paper. There's a make called Bockingford. That's nice for brush work where you want more texture, or for ruling pens work as well when you really want the texture. So, but I would only use probably about 3 or 4 different types of paper, and mainly just for all the kind of practice work I do, I would be using layout paper.
So does it mean that you're still practicing? Like,
oh yes.
Yeah. Wait,
yes.
I'm confused. Like, I was I was about to ask you, like, after so many years, how much time do you spend even on calligraphy? But I was not expecting to ask about practice. Like, how does this happen? Like,
Well, yes, I mean, and if I didn't have a commission or teaching or whatever, something like that, obviously that takes time. But if I have some free time and I think, now what am I going to do? I would practice. Yes, I would think, which tool, what would I like to do? Do I want to use a brush or a ruling pen or the pointed pen, or shall I try and develop more variations, or what? So I would make a decision about what I want to do, and then I would just, hours and hours spend using that tool and practicing different things and developing different ways of using it, or different letter styles or whatever. Yeah, still definitely.
this is
Yes.
super cool. I'm amazed, and I'm like, what's it? What do you think is in calligraphy that makes us like get lost in those letters and like keep writing and keep writing? Like,
I
don't
know
know.
it's amazing, isn't it? Actually, yes.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, because looking back at the 40 years or so since I've been doing calligraphy, it is still as fascinating now, even after all those years, as it was when I first started. And when one thinks, well, in English, we have the 26 letters. We don't have accents on letters like one would do in some other languages. So it's quite sort of basic, really. And yet, think what we can do with those 26 letters. And it is just endlessly fascinating. It's, yeah, I don't quite know why it's so fascinating, but it is, after all those years, still to find it absolutely wonderful. Yeah,
And
which is great, really.
have you ever tried other like languages, like some, like, I don't know, let's say Cyrillic or
I haven't, no,
no?
but when I've seen examples, I mean, the shapes are wonderful, and it would to try, yeah, with some guidance, it'd be great to try it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think,
That's
yeah, just thinking about, I mean, one of the most important thing for me is line, is quality of line. So I am fascinated by lines. And of course, if you think of all the tools we've been talking about, you get a different sort of line, with a brush than you do with a Cola pen and whichever tool. So I love those lines, and it is just endlessly fascinating to play with lines and make letters from them, obviously. But I
what,
think it's the line is the thing.
what do you mean exactly by the line? You mean the stroke, or is it something specific in the letters? I'm a bit confused.
Yeah. No, it's like, as you pick up the pen, say you dip it into the ink and you start and you make a line or
Okay.
a stroke. Yes.
Yes,
And that for me is fascinating,
I see.
about that, what you do with that line. How is it a very fine line? Is it quite thick? Has it got a smooth edge to it? Does it have a textured or sort of bitten edge to it? And of course that varies depending on the tool that you use. But that line or the stroke, yeah, is for me is endlessly fascinating, which is why earlier when I said, when you use the Cola pen and you make one line and it all sort of the ink spatters and everything, and you just, woo, look at that. And it is, even after 40 years, it is still fascinating, even without it turning into a letter. Just that line in itself is
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's so funny and so cool at the same time to hear it, because, like, I don't know, sometimes I'm asking just myself, like, would I always like love calligraphy the same way? Sometimes I'm afraid that it will stop, but now listening that, like, so much time and you haven't stopped loving it, and I can see it
Oh
and
no,
hear it,
yes,
and
yes,
this
yes,
is just so super cool.
yes, yeah. No, and I feel, and it is absolutely great that I have been able to do that my whole adult life. and really, you know, my love of drawing. And so I started when I was a very small child, and even after all these years, I still absolutely love it, and it's wonderful to have been able to do that. So yeah, I'm very grateful, really.
You know, now with internet, I've spoken with other people. I think like there are so many people involved with calligraphy, which I think like I believe that never before so many people were involved. But is this true? Because I don't know. I haven't been living for years before I've been born, so I cannot be sure. I cannot be sure how many people were involved, but I don't know.
Yes.
Because of internet, I feel like that last few years there are so many people getting into calligraphy, and it's just my illusion that it's the time that the most people ever are involved with
Yes,
calligraphy.
that is interesting, because we know because of the internet, whereas before then it could be that actually there were lots of people doing it, but because we weren't aware. I mean, in England, there've been calligraphy. Well, the Society of Scribes and Illuminators Calligraphy Society, that's 100 years old now. So, and because we had Edward Johnston, what was the real founder of calligraphy in the sort of more well, not modern, but you know, movement of calligraphy came from him. So we've had a big tradition in this country of calligraphy going back a very long way. But yeah, you're right. How many people were actually really doing it, I don't know. Yeah, well, perhaps the internet it's a good thing if people have seen lots of examples and have thought, oh, I like that, I'd like to have a go. Then if it draws more people in, that's good.
Yeah, it definitely draws more people in, but at the same time, there a lot are not learning it the proper way, you know.
Yes,
like
I agree with you on that. Yeah, and it is a problem, and it's a shame as well, because you know, because well, we all know that you need to have a good basis, a good start, and learn all the rules, and learn from someone good as well, who can point you in the right direction and help you and so on. But yes, if you don't have that, yeah, I think it ultimately means that the general standard is lowered, which I think is a shame.
do you think this can be fixed, or how could it be fixed at all?
Yes, I know. Yeah, I mean,
I mean, in your opinion, what has to be done in order this to be fixed?
I absolutely agree that people need to learn properly, and to have a good foundation, and that is done through going to classes or having an online class. Yeah. But I also think that people have to be prepared to put the time in, and you know, and as we were saying earlier, you know, and the practice, and that perhaps not everyone either has the time or wants it to be they want to be able to do it just like that.
Yeah.
And perhaps not spend the time, but it's so important to learn all the basics well from a good teacher, and then do a lot of practice. It's very, very, very important.
Can you share some names of people that you're following today? They could be some younger, or I don't know, people that are calligraphers and that you like, or you like what they do in general.
Well, one, you know, quite a big influence on me in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so has been Michael Clark, American lettering designer.
Okay.
And he and I did quite a few collaborations together. So that was a great experience, where he's of course in America and I'm in England. He would do part of the piece of work, I would do another part of it, and then we would put it together. I would scan my piece and send it to him, and he would put it together in a design. So we did, oh goodness me, about 40-50 pieces like that.
Okay.
So that I very much admire his work, and he kind of got me back into using ruling pens as well, which I had used in the past, but you know, had sort of stopped a bit. And as I tell people, if they come to my copper plate variations workshop, or as some people now call it, Yallop plate, it is entirely his fault. Because he encouraged me to do the variations. He said, that, well, it's all very well, you're doing the formal stuff and you can do that, fine. What about doing something different? So it was through his encouragement that I started to develop those variations, and which, I've thoroughly enjoyed it and been able to pass it on to other people as well. So he, definitely. There's also Julian Waters. Of course, his work is just amazing. I think his work is lovely. Gemma Black in Australia, she does lovely things. And there's an Italian calligrapher called Chiara Riva, whose work is she just does lovely. She came to a class of mine in Italy a few years ago, and you could see just watching her how good she is, so I think her work is lovely.
Yeah, I love her work as well, and I think she's very young. I mean, I'm not sure, I haven't seen her, but
yes, well, I would say she was she was young. Yes. She's certainly young compared to me. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And oh gosh, Ewan Clayton, I think he does lovely stuff. And Mike Kessick, American, does wonderful pointed pen things and variations of that. Very interesting. His work. Gosh, there are so many actually.
No,
I feel I'm going to leave people out, and but no. I did a lot. There are a lot of wonderful calligraphers out there. Yeah, there are some really, really good people, which is great. It's wonderful to see their work. So.
Awesome. Then I don't know. I don't have actually any more questions. If there is something that you wanted to speak about, but I didn't ask you, I mean.
Yes. No, I don't. Yeah. Because I remember you asking about the people who had influenced me in the beginning. As I said, that was Werner Schneider. And then Hans Joachim Berger, we mentioned, and Friedrich Poppel, Jean Larcher. Yeah, I think we've done those. So yeah, that probably is about it. Yes.
Okay, then thank you very much, Rachel, for being on the podcast. I mean, it was super nice to hear your story. We will keep in touch to see what we can do collaboration with Calligraphy Masters and you teaching. I think this would be super nice. I think a lot of people would be interested. And I will be happy to invite you again on a podcast. Like I have another podcast doing with Paul Antonio, where you can pop up for like 15-20 minutes. We discuss different topics about calligraphy.
Yes, sure.
That'd be super nice. And yeah, thank you for being guests. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, share with your friends. Go follow Rachell Yallop. Did I pronounce it correct?
That you did. Well done.
For a second, I was like, wait.
No, don't worry. It's a very unusual name. So a lot of people do get it wrong, but you were absolutely perfect. So
yes. I'll leave the links in the description, guys. There will be also some pop-ups here around the screen. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And as always, keep writing.
Great. Thank you too.
Okay.
Good. Well, well done for what you're doing. It's great. So
thank you, Rachel.
And you've got so many followers on Instagram, haven't you? So we're bringing, that, which again is good.
Well,
lots of
just trying to spread the love word for calligraphy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know I haven't done everything the best way, but I mean, everything I'm doing myself, like I do a work for like 15-20 different people. I do it by myself, and I discovered calligraphy just 9 years ago, And
really? Gosh, not very long.
I mean, I've always had love for letters, but calligraphy as a term, as what it is, I discovered like 9 years ago. And before this, I was just a bartender, So everything that I do it's purely out of love for calligraphy. And
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Good.
Awesome. Well, have a nice day or evening.
Yes, and you. Yes, yes.
And we keep in touch.
Yes, good, lovely. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, guys. Let me know what you think about it. Drop a comment with your favorite moment from the talk with Rachel. And if you want to get a chance to win one of the Calligraphy Masters alphabet prints, let me know if you are interested to have a workshop with Rachel. And if so, what kind of workshop should it be? Should it be copperplate or something else? I see you this week or next week. As always, thank you guys. Keep writing. Love you all.